There are some wounds that time does not heal. Not completely. They become part of you, like the rings inside a tree, marking the years that passed and the seasons you survived. For me, that wound was the day my son walked away. He didn't slam the door. He didn't shout. He just left. And for years, the silence where his voice used to be was louder than any goodbye. I am Eleanor. I am 73 years old now. I have lived long enough to understand that love is not always enough. That sometimes the people we raise, the people we pour our hearts into, will grow up and grow away from us. Not because we did something wrong, not because we failed, but because they are on their own journey, and sometimes that journey leads them far from home. My son, Daniel, was my firstborn. He came into the world on a rainy Tuesday in March, with a full head of dark hair and a cry that filled the delivery room. His father, my husband Robert, held him first, and I remember watching the two of them, father and son, and thinking, this is what love looks like. This is what I was put on this earth to do. I was 23 years old when Daniel was born. Young. Filled with hope. I thought I knew everything about being a mother. I thought if I loved him enough, fed him enough, held him enough, he would always be safe. He would always come home. But life has a way of teaching us that we don't know as much as we think we do. Daniel was a quiet boy. Even as a child, he was thoughtful, observant. He would sit for hours, drawing pictures of horses and houses and the mountains behind our home. He was not like the other boys, who ran and shouted and climbed trees. He was gentle, sensitive, and I loved him for it. His father loved him too, but Robert was a man of few words. He worked long hours at the mill, came home tired, and expected things to run smoothly. He didn't understand Daniel's quietness. He didn't understand why Daniel would rather read a book than play baseball, why he would rather sit in the garden with me than go fishing with the other fathers and sons. You're too soft on him, Robert would say, after Daniel had retreated to his room instead of joining us for dinner. He needs to toughen up. The world is hard, Eleanor. He needs to be ready for it. But I saw something different. I saw a boy who felt things deeply, who noticed when I was tired and would bring me a cup of tea without being asked, who would sit with his grandmother, my mother, when she came to visit, listening to her stories with an attention that made her feel seen. I saw a boy with a heart so big, it sometimes seemed too big for his small body. I thought he will grow into it. He will find his way. And he will always need his mother. I was wrong about that last part. Daniel grew as children do. He became a teenager, then a young man. He went to college, the first in our family to do so. Robert was proud, though he didn't say it. He showed it by paying the tuition, by working overtime, by coming home with a new briefcase for Daniel's graduation. But the words never came. And Daniel, I think, felt their absence. I tried to bridge the gap between them. I would say, your father is proud of you, Daniel. He just doesn't know how to say it. And Daniel would nod, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. The same hurt I had seen when he was a boy, after Robert had dismissed his drawings or told him to stop being so sensitive. When Daniel graduated from college, he moved to the city. He got a job at a publishing house, editing books. It suited him. He was good with words, careful with them, the way his father was careful with the tools in his workshop. He called me every Sunday, without fail. We would talk for an hour, sometimes more. He would tell me about his work, about the books he was editing, about the friends he was making. He would ask about the garden, about the neighbors, about his father. How is he? Daniel would ask, and I would hear the longing in his voice. Fine, I would say. He's working hard. He asks about you. That last part was not always true. Robert rarely asked. But I said it anyway because I wanted Daniel to feel loved. I wanted to hold the family together with words, since his father could not. Years passed. Daniel married a woman named Sarah, a painter with bright eyes and a laugh that filled a room. I liked her. I liked how she looked at Daniel, as if he were the only person in the world. They had a daughter, a little girl named Lily, and when Daniel called to tell me, his voice was thick with tears. You're a grandmother, Mom, he said. And I wept too, sitting in my kitchen, looking at the photograph of Robert on the wall, wishing he could feel what I was feeling. I visited them in the city as often as I could. I would take the train, a small suitcase packed with homemade cookies and knitted sweaters, and I would spend a weekend in their small apartment, holding Lily, watching Daniel be the father I knew he would be. He was patient. He was gentle. He read to her with the same attention he had given my mother stories. And I would watch him and think, he is everything I hoped he would be. But something was missing. I could feel it, even if I couldn't name it. Daniel was happy, I think. He loved his wife. He loved his daughter. He loved his work. But there was a distance in him, a quiet space that no one seemed to fill. I thought it was the distance from his father. I thought if Robert would just reach out, just say the words, Daniel would feel whole. Robert never reached out. And then, Robert died. Robert's death was sudden. A heart attack, on a Tuesday afternoon, in the mill where he had worked for 35 years. I got the call at home, while I was watering the garden. I remember the sound of the phone, the voice of the foreman, the way the world seemed to tilt and then go very still. Daniel came home for the funeral. He arrived the night before alone. Sarah stayed in the city with Lily, who was too young to travel. I met him at the door, and when I saw him, I started to cry. He held me, and for a moment he was my little boy again, the one who brought me tea when I was tired, the one who noticed when I was sad. "It's okay, Mom," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here. I'm here." The funeral was small. A few neighbors, a few men from the mill, Daniel and me. The pastor spoke about Robert's hard work, his dedication, his quiet way. I listened and I thought he was quiet. Too quiet. And now he'll be quiet forever. After the service, Daniel and I sat in the living room, the same living room where he had drawn his pictures as a boy. The rain was falling outside, tapping against the windows. We drank tea and talked about Robert. Or rather, I talked. Daniel listened. "He loved you," I said. He just didn't know how to show it. Daniel looked at his hands. They were his father's hands. Strong, capable, but softer, somehow. Gentler. "I know," he said. And then, after a long pause, I spent my whole life trying to make him proud. And now he's gone, and I don't know if I ever did. I reached for his hand. He was proud, Daniel. He was so proud. He just couldn't say it. That was his failing. Not yours. Daniel nodded, but I could see that my words didn't reach the place where the hurt lived. The place that only his father's words could have healed. And now those words would never come. He left the next morning. He had to get back to Sarah, to Lily, to his life. I stood at the door and watched him drive away, and I thought, he will come back. He will come back for holidays, for birthdays, for summer visits. He will come back because I am his mother, and a mother is a home that never closes. And he did come back for a while. He came for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, for Lily's first birthday. He called every Sunday, just like before. But something had shifted. The calls became shorter. The visits became fewer. He would say he was busy, that work was Dima, that Lily had a cold, that Sarah's mother needed them. I understood. Or I told myself I understood. Life is busy. People get caught up in their own worlds. It didn't mean he didn't love me. It didn't mean he had forgotten. But then the calls stopped. Not all at once, but slowly, like the fading of light at dusk. One Sunday, he didn't call. I waited by the phone, telling myself he would call later, that something had come up. He didn't call. The next Sunday, I called him. He answered, but his voice was distracted. He said he was sorry, that he had meant to call, that things were hectic. We talked for 10 minutes, and then he said he had to go. The next month, I called again. This time, Sarah answered. She said Daniel was at work, that she would tell him I called. She was polite, but distant. I asked about Lily, and she said Lily was fine, busy with school. And then there was a silence, the kind of silence that feels like a door closing. I didn't call again. I told myself I was giving him space. I told myself he would call when he was ready. I waited. Weeks passed. Months. The phone stayed silent. I wrote letters. Long letters, telling him about the garden, about the neighbors, about the memories that came to me in the quiet of the evening. I told him I loved him. I told him I missed him. I told him there was always a place for him, for Sarah, for Lily. I sent them to his address, the one I had written in my address book years before. I never got a reply. I don't know when I stopped hoping. It wasn't one moment. It was a slow letting go, like releasing a balloon into the sky and watching it get smaller and smaller until it disappears. I stopped looking at the driveway. I stopped listening for the phone. I stopped setting an extra plate at the table just in case. I told myself I had done everything I could. I had loved him. I had raised him. I had given him roots and wings. And now I had to let him fly. Even if it meant he flew away and never came back. Years passed. 7 years, to be exact. 7 years of silence. 7 years of birthdays and holidays alone. 7 years of watching Lily grow up in photographs that Sarah posted online. Photographs I looked at again and again, memorizing the shape of her face, the color of her hair, the way she smiled like her father. I told myself I was fine. I had my garden. I had my books. I had my friends from the church, women my age who understood the loneliness of empty nests and absent children. We would have tea together and they would tell me about their children, their grandchildren, the visits that came too rarely, the phone calls that came less often than they hoped. And I would nod and say, yes, it's hard. But what can we do? They have their own lives. But inside, there was a wound that would not close. A wound shaped like my son, like the boy who brought me tea, like the man who held me at his father's funeral and said, "I'm here, Mom. I'm here." I didn't understand why he had disappeared. I had gone over it 1,000 times in my mind, searching for the moment, the word, the gesture that had pushed him away. Was it something I said? Something I didn't say? Was it the way I talked about Robert, the way I tried to make him understand that his father had loved him, even if he couldn't show it? Or was it something deeper, something that had nothing to do with me at all? I never found the answer. I had to learn to live without it. I was 70 years old when the letter came. It was a Tuesday, the same day of the week Robert had died, all those years ago. I was in the garden, pulling weeds, my hands in the dirt, when I heard the mail truck. I brushed off my knees and walked to the mailbox, expecting the usual, bills, catalogs, the newsletter from the church. But there was a letter. A white envelope, my name and address written in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Handwriting I would recognize anywhere. The careful, deliberate letters of a boy who had learned to write at the kitchen table, while his mother looked over his shoulder. My hands were shaking as I opened it. I sat down on the porch step, the sun warm on my face, and I read, "Dear Mom, I don't know how to start this letter. I've written it 100 times in my head, but the words never seem right. I'm sorry it's taken me so long. I'm sorry for everything. I left because I didn't know how to be around you. Not because of anything you did. Because of me. Because when I looked at you, I saw my father. I saw the way he looked at me, the way he never said he was proud, the way I spent my whole life trying to earn something I never got. And I couldn't carry that anymore. I couldn't be reminded of it every time I saw your face. I know that doesn't make sense. I know it's not fair. You were always there. You were always kind. But I couldn't separate you from him. And I needed to get away. I needed to find out who I was without all of that. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to understand. I just needed you to know that it wasn't your fault. It was never your fault. It was mine. Sarah left 2 years ago. She took Lily. I don't see them much anymore. I've been living alone in a small apartment, working. I've had a lot of time to think. And what I keep coming back to is you. The garden. The kitchen table. The way you used to read to me when I was sick. The way you always knew when I needed a cup of tea. I miss you, Mom. I miss home. If you want to see me, I will come. I will come whenever you want. I will stay as long as you'll have me. Or if you don't want to see me, I will understand. I have no right to expect anything. I love you. I always have. I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. Your son, Daniel. I read the letter 3 times. The words blurred the first time, through tears. The second time, I let each word sink in, feeling the weight of 7 years of silence, 7 years of hurt, 7 years of wondering. The third time, I folded the letter carefully and pressed it to my chest, and I wept. Not tears of anger, not tears of blame, tears of relief. Because after 7 years, I finally knew it wasn't my fault. It was never my fault. And he had come back, that I wrote back to Daniel that same night. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had drawn his pictures, where we had eaten Sunday dinners, where I had sat alone for so many years. I took out a piece of paper and I wrote, "My dear Daniel, there is nothing to forgive. There never was. You were a boy carrying a weight that was too heavy for you. And I was a mother who didn't know how to lighten it. I miss you too. I miss you every day. And I want to see you. I want you to come home. Not to the house, not to the garden, but to me. To the mother who has been waiting for you. Not with anger, but with love. Always with love. Come when you can. Stay as long as you want. The door has always been open. It will always be open. With all my love, Mom." I mailed the letter the next morning, and then I waited. Not the desperate waiting of the years before, but a patient waiting. A waiting that knew this time he would come. He came on a Saturday. I was in the kitchen making soup, the way I used to make soup when he was a boy. Tomato soup, with basil from the garden. The recipe his grandmother had taught me. I heard a car in the driveway, and I looked out the window. There was a car I didn't recognize. An old sedan, gray, a little dented, and there was a man getting out of it. A man with graying hair, a tired face, and eyes that were the same blue as his father's. I dried my hands on my apron. I walked to the front door. I opened it. He was standing on the porch, the same porch where he had stood as a boy, waiting for the school bus, waiting for his father to come home from work. He looked older, thinner. There were lines on his face that hadn't been there before. But he was my son, my Daniel. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice was rough, uncertain. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just opened my arms, and he stepped into them. And for a long time we stood there in the doorway, holding each other. The way I had held him when he was a baby. The way I had held him when he was a boy, after a nightmare. The way I had held him at his father's funeral, when he had said, "I'm here, Mom. I'm here." He was here. After 7 years, he was here. He came home quietly. He stayed for 3 days. He slept in his old room. The room I had kept the same, with his books on the shelf, his drawings on the wall, his bed made with the same quilt I had made for him when he went to college. I made his favorite meals, pot roast, apple pie, tomato soup. We sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the stars come out, the way we had when he was a boy. We talked. We talked about the years we had lost, the silences that had grown between us, the hurt that had festered in the dark. He told me about his marriage, how it had crumbled under the weight of his silence, how Sarah had finally given up waiting for him to be present, to be there. He told me about Lily, how he missed her, how he called her every week, how she was growing up so fast he could barely recognize her in the photographs. "I was afraid," he said one evening, as we sat on the porch swing. "I was afraid that if I came back, I would feel like a failure. Like I had let you down. Like I had let Dad down." I took his hand. "Your father," I said, "had his own fears, his own silences. He loved you, Daniel, but he didn't know how to show it. And I think, in some way, he was afraid too. Afraid of being seen, of being known. He gave you the only thing he knew how to give. Hard work, stability, a roof over your head. But he couldn't give you the words. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry that I couldn't teach him how." Daniel was quiet for a long time. The stars were bright overhead, the same stars his father had taught him to name when he was a boy. Orion, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper. "I've been trying to be different with Lily," he said. "I tell her I love her. I tell her I'm proud of her. I don't want her to have to guess." I squeezed his hand. "You are different," I said. "You are your own man. And you're a good father. A good son. You always were." He didn't stay. He had to go back to the city, to his job, to his small apartment, to the life he had built. But before he left, he made me a promise. "I'll call," he said, "every Sunday, like I used to. And I'll come back. For holidays. For birthdays. For no reason at all. I'm not going to disappear again, Mom. I promise." I believed him. Not because I had to, not because I was afraid of losing him again, but because I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. Peace. Acceptance. The quiet understanding that he was loved, that he had always been loved, that he didn't have to earn it or prove it. He walked away that day, down the path to his car. But it wasn't a leaving. It was a going. A going that knew he would come back. That was 3 years ago. Daniel calls every Sunday just like he promised. Sometimes we talk for an hour. Sometimes just a few minutes. But he calls. And he comes for holidays, for birthdays, for summer weekends when the garden is in bloom. He brings Lily sometimes, and I watch them together, father and daughter, and I see the love between them, open and unafraid. Lily is 13 now. She has her father's eyes, her mother's laugh. She sits with me in the garden, and I teach her the names of the flowers, the way I taught her father, all those years ago. She tells me about her friends, her school, her dreams. And I listen the way I always listened, because that is what mothers do. We listen. We wait. We love. Even when the silence is long. Even when the silence is long. Even when the waiting is hard. I think about the years Daniel was gone. 7 years. 7 years of silence. 7 years of wondering. And I think about what I learned in those years. That love is not about holding on. It is about letting go. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of the story you thought would be. Letting go of the idea that you can control the people you love. Daniel walked away for years. He walked away because he needed to find himself, because he needed to heal wounds I didn't even know were there. And when he was ready, he came back. Not with grand gestures or dramatic apologies, but quietly, with a letter, with a car in the driveway, with arms open, waiting to be held. If there is a lesson in all of this, it is this: the door is always open. Not the door of the house, but the door of the heart. You can close it if you need to for a time. You can protect yourself from the hurt, the silence, the waiting. But when the one you love comes back, when they knock, you can open it again. And you will find that the love has not gone anywhere. It has been there all along, waiting. I am 73 years old now. I have lived long enough to know that life is full of goodbyes. Some are forever. Some are just for a season. And some, if you are patient, if you are brave, if you are willing to leave the door open, will turn into hellos. Daniel walked away for years. But he came home. Quietly. Gently. The way a river finds its way back to the sea. And I was here, waiting, the way a mother always waits. Not with expectation. Not with demand. But with love. Always with love. The garden is in bloom. The sun is setting. And on the porch swing, there is a cup of tea, a photograph of a boy with dark hair and blue eyes, and a heart that learned, after all these years, that the ones we love never really leave. They just take the long way home.